Well, I hope everybody's got their sheets from a couple of weeks back. We had singing last week, and a couple of weeks ago we were starting on this lesson about heaven. We're studying in the spiritual realms, as most of you know. If there are any visitors, just to let you know, we're studying the spiritual realms, a whole realm of existence that we rarely think about or realize is there, and yet it's there. And we talked about the Hadean realm, and now we're talking about heaven. And we looking at your notes there, we defined heaven, and heaven has three definitions depending on the context. Sometimes it's talking about the skies, the aerial heaven, sometimes outer space, the sidereal, and sometimes it's talking about the heaven where God dwells, the third heaven, if you please. And so that helps us to see the application of the word in its context. We talked about heaven as being God's abode, number 2 on your outline. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit all live in this place called heaven. And then we were talking about the inhabitants of heaven when we ran out of time at the last class. We were talking about angels, and we talked about archangels, and we were getting ready to talk about cherubim. There's not very many references to cherubim in the Bible, but there's at least one that I've got here on your notes, 2 Kings 19 and verse 15. And Hezekiah is praying, King Hezekiah, and he says, Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, and he said, O Lord God of Israel, the one who dwells between the cherubim, you are God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. So the God who dwells between the cherubim. Anybody know what that's kind of referring to? Yeah. Yeah, it's the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant in the most holy place. And if you've ever seen that Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the what was the name of that first one? Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's the first one. Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they had that ark, and it had those. When you looked at the lid, it had those wings stretched out, and that's a representation of what they had, what the Jews had. And so the cherubim are winged creatures, and on the Ark of the Covenant, they had a representation of them on the mercy seat. And that's what Hezekiah is referring to there. So those are heavenly beings of some kind. We don't know a lot about them, but they do exist. And then in Isaiah 6, there is a reference to seraphim. So cherubim and seraphim, two different types of creatures. But Isaiah 6 kind of paints an interesting picture of these creatures. This is in this chapter, in this part of Isaiah, Isaiah is receiving his call to his ministry, to his prophetic ministry. And you can see it's here in the first 6-7 verses or so. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. So Isaiah gets a vision of God, and he sees him in the temple. Above it, that is above the temple, stood seraphim. So there's another heavenly creature. Each one had 6 wings. So here's the description. Here's what a seraphim looks like, as best as you can do it, write it down. Each one had 6 wings. With 2, he covered his face. With 2, he covered his feet. And with 2, he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal which he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it, and he said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. So here is another heavenly creature, a winged creature with 6 wings. As he says, 2 he flew, 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet. Now this is just a little aside here, and I don't know for sure if this is a reference to that, but in the Hebrew Scriptures, sometimes the feet is a reference to the privates. And so, not that he's covering his feet down here, but he's covering himself here. And you can find lots of references to that in the Hebrew Scriptures, and some scholars suggest that is the picture here. So it's a picture of modesty. He's covering himself here. With 2 wings he flies, and with the other 2 he covers his face, because he's in the presence of God, apparently. So a strange-looking creature. Now, closely related to that is the creatures around the throne in the book of Revelation. If we'll flip over there to Revelation 4, they're just called 4 living creatures. And we don't know for sure if these are cherubim or if these are seraphim. They sound more like seraphim to me, the way they're described, but they could be cherubim. I don't know. But in Revelation 4, verses 6, 7, and 8, before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second creature like a calf, the third had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, and there's the reference to what we read earlier in Isaiah. They were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. So these sound like they may be seraphim. We just don't know whether they're seraphim or cherubim, so I sometimes will separate those out. Now, when you think about the creatures that we have listed here, angels, archangels, which are ruling angels, then you have cherubim and seraphim. Depending on which scholar you read, some scholars will categorize cherubim and seraphim as another class of angels. And I don't know what the answer to that is, whether they are or not. Some scholars will separate them out as a different class of creatures. It really doesn't matter because there certainly is a difference between a cherubim and a seraphim and an archangel. There's some kind of difference, but some put them all under the heading of angels, and some separate the cherubim out and the seraphim out as separate creatures, separate types of beings. And then there were 24 24 elders, back up in verse 4 of Revelation 4. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting clothed with white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. So here they are, and this is John seeing this. So we don't really know what these are. We can kind of guess. We can take a stab at it. Sometimes people link them up with the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles, and that may well be. But the fact is, whatever they were, they're there. So these are just different kinds of spiritual beings that exist in that spiritual world that we never see. But up there in heaven, there's all of these beings. And what I list, there's 6 different beings that I have listed there. And that just fascinates me. We know very little about these beings. We probably know more about angels themselves than any other of these beings, but it's just fascinating to me that all of those creatures exist and in some way, fashion, or another have an impact on our life. Questions, comments up to this point, and we'll get into the good stuff here, and we'll start talking about heaven itself.
I question it being the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles, because the Bible says there's none ascended except that one.
Yeah. So I think, and that's why I said nobody really knows what these are, and that's true. And on top of all that, keep in mind a lot of this is visionary. It's a vision and symbolic and things like this.
It's a lot that's figurative, and it could represent the 12.
Yeah, like a representation for them, for their presence or something. Yeah, we just don't know. That's a fact. That's a fact. We don't know. Down at the bottom, we have heaven as our future home. This is the good stuff. This is the good part. This other stuff is defining heaven, telling us what it is and who lives there. But now we get down to the good stuff. And let's go to John 14 for starters. And I've heard all kinds of different takes on John 14, and none of them make sense to me except what I call the straightforward approach. But for John 14, verses 1 through 3, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, I just want to give you don't want to get bogged down in a big discussion here, but I want to give you the different viewpoints. One viewpoint I heard, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all, is that the Father's house is the church. In my Father's house, the church, the house of God, are many dwelling places. So there's room for you in the church. And I go to prepare a place for you. To me, that makes no sense. That just doesn't track in my mind. But I've heard that view espoused by gospel preachers. Another view is that the Father's house is all of creation. That the whole creation is the Father's house. And there are many rooms. So there's this room here on the earth, and then there's a room called Hades, and then there's another room called heaven. So there are many rooms, and so you just go from one room to the next. I find a little bit of difficulty with that too. That's why I like what I call the straightforward approach. Yes?
Well, it couldn't be because it says mansions. Why would Hades
Yeah, well, and of course, the word, that's another aspect. Mansion is not really correct. It should be rooms or dwelling places. We get this vision sometimes that up there in heaven, each one of us has got our own personal little castle, our own personal little mansion. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying at all. We're not all going to be isolated in our own little house. We're all going to be together in God's house. That's the picture. The mansion, the room, the dwelling place is something altogether different. But just take this thing straight on here for just a second. In my Father's house. All right. Where's the Father live? Heaven. That seems to me to be the straightforward approach. My Father lives up there in heaven. Okay, so in my Father's house are many mansions or rooms or dwelling places. It's actually more literal. The old King James got us off track by putting mansion there, and the New King James picked up on it and carried it on. But it really literally is a room or a dwelling place. Okay, not this idea of a big fancy house that you're going to live in. And then he says in the same verse, I go to prepare a place for you. Where's he going? He's going to heaven, isn't he? Yeah. So to me, if you just take this straight on, just like it reads, it makes a whole lot more sense. In my Father's house, up there in heaven, are many mansions. Plenty of room for everybody in heaven. Everybody who wants to go can go. There's plenty of room. And I'm going to prepare a place for you. Now, as Jesus goes to prepare a place, by the way, he's got to go someplace else first. Think about it. Where's he going first? He's going to the cross. Yeah, first I go to the cross, and then I go to my Father's house. But going to the cross is how he prepares the place. I go to prepare a place. I got to go to the cross, and then I got to go up there. Okay? But just think, don't lose sight of that to prepare a place, he had to die. So he had to go to the cross first, and then from the cross, he goes to his Father's house, okay? And I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. So there we have come again. We have what we call the second coming of Christ, the second return, the second advent, where he descends from heaven once again. So that where I am, there you may be also. So we think about this place called heaven, and death scares us to death, doesn't it? A lot of people, not Christians. It shouldn't scare Christians to death, but it scares a lot of people to death. They think it's the worst thing in the world that could ever happen to you. But actually, a nice way to look at death is just going through a door. Think about that. That's all it is. Here we are in this world, this creation, and we're going to go through the doorway of death. It's just going from one room to another, okay? And you've all heard that story. I'll see if I can recall the details. There was a dog on the other side of the door, and he was clawing to get in because he knew his master was on the other side. And somebody said that's kind of a neat picture, because it's kind of like the way we should be about going to heaven. We know who's on the other side of the door. We know who's on the other side of the doorway. God's over there, and we want to get in there. So don't let death scare you. It's just a doorway. You're going from here to another existence, to another realm. You're not going to cease to exist. You're just changing places. You're going from here to the spiritual realm. So if you see it that way, it's not nearly as frightening for us. Yes, sir.
Isn't this my dwelling place?
Yeah, there you go. Now you're getting at it. I was headed that way. I'm glad you brought that up. Did you want to elaborate some more?
In my mind, if this is my dwelling place here,
Yeah.
and Jesus is going to prepare a place for me,
Now you're talking.
then he's preparing my eternal
Body. Yeah, you got it. And that brings up, since you said that, 2 Corinthians 5. If you'll flip over there. And this is on our notes, but it injects here real nice since you brought that up with John 14. Paul says, we know, verse 1, we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. There's your dwelling place. There's your dwelling place. It's a new body. It's a new body that God has prepared. A body that's suited to live in heaven. A body that won't get sick. A body that won't die. That's your dwelling place. That's your mansion. That's your room. that you're going to have. You're not going to have this house all secluded off by yourself where you can just sit there with your family. We're all going to be together with God around the throne of God, but we're going to have our new house. But and you know, the scripture says it right here. And he talks about this earthly house. How does he describe it there in verse 1? T word, what is it? Tent. Now what's a tent? But it's temporary, isn't it? You can take it down, you put it back up, you can move it around. So it's temporary. So if this tent is destroyed, this tent, we have a tent, a building. We're going to have a permanent structure up there. That's what you were talking about. We're going to have a permanent structure up there. A building, a house, not made with hands. This is the house in which your spirit dwells. And you're going to have a new one up there in heaven. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. We're going to have a new resurrected body up there in heaven. And verse 2, for this, in this we groan, earnestly desiring. I'm not afraid of this. See, that's what he's saying here. Earnestly desiring to be clothed with our habitation, which is from heaven. Can't wait. Can't wait for the new body. Can't wait to not get sick anymore, not get tired anymore, not get weary anymore, not worry about death anymore. This new body is going to be a super duper duper body that will last forever.
That's what Paul being the writer here too, but that's when he makes reference to die is gain.
Yeah.
To live, he knew, you know, for him to live and do the work of God was a benefit for the people there, and he was going to do that, but he knew to die and go on to be
Is better.
Gain,
Yeah.
be better.
And I preached that a lot, you know, when COVID was running hot and heavy and everybody was scared to death of it. I said, look, you know, if you die, it's better. That's what Paul said. Now, I said, we don't want you to die, of course, and you don't want to die, of course, but think of it biblically. To die is gain. Death is better. What's on the other side is better than what's on this side. So don't be afraid of it. If it happens, it happens. And it's going to happen sooner or later anyway, to all of us. It's coming. So we may as well toughen ourselves up to it and get used to it. We're going to leave this world. We weren't put here to stay forever. We're put here to move on into the next realm. Okay, questions, comments up to this point?
But those who are not prepared needs to be afraid of it.
Oh yeah, if you're not ready, if you don't belong to Christ, you need to be very, very afraid. Absolutely. In heaven, we have a reward. In Matthew 5 and verse 12, Jesus talked about, blessed are those who are persecuted. It's interesting, you wouldn't think, and this gets back again to perspective, just like we were saying before about perspective on dying. Here's perspective about persecution. In Matthew 5 and verse 12, Jesus said, in fact, verse 11, for context, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Blessed. Anybody know what the word blessed means? Happy. Happy. Who's going to be happy about persecution? And people talking about me and saying all kinds of stuff about me. He says, blessed are you. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. And I don't think the language of Scripture does it justice. We're going to look in a little while about the street of gold and all of that stuff. We're going to look at that a little bit. But I don't think that does it justice. That's not literal. There's nothing literal about that. Why do we say that? What's going to happen to gold? It's going to melt, yeah. Everything's going to melt. This whole creation as we know it will be no more. It's going to dissolve, being on fire, it's going to melt. So there's not going to be any real literal gold in heaven. But that's a picture. Gold is beautiful. Gold is precious. Gold is valuable. And so God's trying to paint a picture. I've never been to heaven. And God's trying to tell me and give me a word picture. Here's some things that will make you want to go there. It has a street of gold. It has this, it has that. It has all these foundations in it, and each one is a different jewel. So it's designed to paint this picture of beauty and grandeur, but I don't believe for 1 second any of that's literal. Not for 1 second, because the material creation as we know it will be destroyed, dissolved. He's just using things we understand and relate to get across this idea of a spiritual place. But it's to be seen as a reward. Heaven is to be seen as a reward. We lay up treasure in heaven, Matthew 19. That was if I remember right, the rich young ruler. (19:21). Jesus told him, he said, if you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. So, treasure in heaven. And a lot of us, we get focused on treasure here, on a big bank account, on a big, I want a big retirement account, I want a big insurance policy, I want a big house, I want a big car, I want a big boat, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it's okay to work for those things, but we lose sight. And this is the danger. We lose sight of the more important. That's just for a little while. That's for 60, 70, 80 years that you're here. And then it's gone. You need to be thinking about the future, the eternal future, and laying up treasures in heaven. If people plan for heaven like they plan for their retirement, they wouldn't miss it. Because people plan for they lay back money, and they have all these policies, and they do this, and they plan for it. Well, why not think of it? Plan for heaven. Lay up treasures in heaven. And of course, how do we do that? How do we lay up treasures in heaven? We do what the Lord says, yeah. That's laying up treasures in heaven. Because the Lord takes notice. He knows what we're doing. And He'll reward us for that. So He knows. So our treasure is there. We already talked about this. Our resurrected body. You brought that up a while ago. Our resurrected body will be there. The body that you have in heaven will be a perfect body designed to live in a perfect place. And then our hope is there, Colossians 1:5. If somebody beats me over there, go ahead and read it. I already got there. So, because of the hope which is laid up for you in heaven, which you heard before in the word of the truth of the gospel. The hope is that thing that we're longing for. Somebody has described hope as two things, desire plus expectation. Some people desire to go to heaven, but they don't expect to go because they know they're not living for the Lord. And other people don't desire to go to hell, but they fully expect that that's where they're headed. Because of the way they're living their life. But when you have desire and expectation together, I desire to go to heaven, and I expect to go to heaven because I'm serving the Lord, and I've been forgiven of my sins. And then you have hope. You have something that can sustain you in the trials of life. When the storms come and the winds blow, that hope of a better place in heaven can sustain you. When sickness hits, when financial hardships hit, when family troubles hit, the one thing that's going to get you through all that is that heavenly hope. That's the true hope of the Christian. The Bible says there's one hope, and this is it. It's the hope that's laid up in heaven. All the rest of the stuff in the long run doesn't matter. All the stuff here on the earth doesn't matter in the long run. It really doesn't. And then we have an inheritance, 1 Peter 1 and verse 4. And look how this inheritance is described for us. Verses 3 through 5. 1 Peter 1 verse 3, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to His abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope. So there's that hope again. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance, incorruptible and undefiled, that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith, for salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. So our inheritance is in heaven. Now, there is a small, minor movement among some of our brethren that say, our hope's not really in heaven. The Lord's going to destroy this earth and renovate it, and our hope's right here on earth. Heaven's going to be on earth. Don't you believe it? The Bible says our hope is in heaven. This earth's going to be destroyed. It's going to be melted and dissolved. Our hope is not for a paradise earth. Our hope is in heaven. And he says that inheritance is incorruptible, it's undefiled, and it will not fade away. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to get old. It's not going to decay. It's not going to wear out. It is perfect in every way. It is exactly what we need. It's what eternal beings need. They need an eternal home that's suitable. And so everything, we can't possibly imagine how grand and glorious this is going to be, that God has prepared all this. You know, a part of all that we've talked about a lot, Jesus coming and dying on the cross, that's what makes all this possible. So it's part of the grander scheme that the Lord came down here, lived among men, died on the cross, so that we can go to that glorious place, so that we can go have that inheritance that's incorruptible and undefiled, that does not fade away. The whole thing ties together into one continuous story. And so that's our future home. That's what we hope for. That's what sustains us in the troubles of life, is that we get to be with the Father. Now, people say, will we know one another in heaven? What do you think? Yeah, who wants to be in heaven with a bunch of strangers? Who are you? That just doesn't track with me with happiness. Happiness would be to see you all there. That'd be happiness. But to see you all not know who you are, that just doesn't track in my mind. But some people think that, well, we won't know one another. Well, you think about the rich man Lazarus, even though that's Hades, but it's after death. They knew each other. The rich man was the rich man. Lazarus was Lazarus. Abraham was Abraham. They were able to communicate with each other. They knew one another after death. When Moses and Elijah was transfigured with Jesus, remember that? Moses has been dead for 1,500 years. Elijah had been dead for 1,000 years. And yet there he was. There's Moses, and there's Elijah, and there's Jesus. And they could tell which one was which. See? So there is recognition, without a doubt. Otherwise, if we don't know anybody, we wouldn't even know who God is. Who's that stranger up there on the throne? I don't know, but he sure looks like a great guy. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
There's a but there, I think. If there's going to be no sadness, no tears in heaven, we won't have a reality of not knowing which one of our family members is not.
Yeah, God will have a way to take care of that. He'll have a way to wipe that out of our mind. He'll wipe away every tear, the Bible says. So he'll have a way to deal with that. And I've also made this point, since you mentioned that, that's a lot of people worry about that. Well, I just won't be happy in heaven if my loved ones aren't there. Well, stop and think about it for a second. Have you ever lost anybody here on the earth that you know went to hell? You know the way they live their life, they're lost. You deal with it, don't you? You deal with it. You don't like it, but you deal with it, and you'll deal with it there. In fact, God will have a way, as you said, he'll have a way of wiping away those tears. He'll have a way of fixing that where you won't, that will not be a problem. Don't let that be a problem for you.
See, we can't comprehend. I just don't think because the horrors that people have seen on this earth, of how people have mistreated one another, things like that, that would have to be erased somehow. All of that would have to be behind us.
Yeah.
Or we would be sad.
Yeah.
And we can't, I just don't think we can comprehend.
We can't comprehend, but I do trust that the Lord can deal with it. Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. He'll have a way of dealing with it. Now, we are out of time. I just looked up at the clock. We are out of time. We'll do Revelation 21 next week, and then we'll slide right on with that other lesson on hell. We'll talk about the other side of the coin here.